Our Chief Executive, Brian Nicholson, will introduce his team shortly, and Roger and Raj will run through a few slides, and then we'll open up for question and answer. As the start of summer approaches, we can talk about the probability of water restrictions, how we're placed, and how these are communicated. So I'm going to hand over to Brian to introduce his council team.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's great to see such a strong turnout from our community. As you know, we're here to provide you with an update on this critical project, the Dannevirke Impounded Supply. What I can assure you is that behind the scenes, there's been a significant amount of work, and one thing I'd like to say is that there's been an unwavering commitment from our dedicated staff, elected members, and all our stakeholders to get this project right. The team has been putting in the effort to ensure that we have positive outcomes for the Dannevirke community. Tonight, we're fortunate to have with us Raj Sapaya, who's our Group Manager, Corporate and Regulatory. Next to him, we have Hamish Feddenby, our Group Manager, Infrastructure. And on the far left, my far left, we have Roger Earp, our Three Waters Manager, and also our Project Lead. These three gentlemen are integral to the success of this project. During this presentation, Roger will provide a comprehensive update and overview of the project, and afterwards, as Mayor Tracy said, we'll open the floor to your questions. Our ultimate goal is straightforward, yet vital, to ensure a safe and reliable water source for Dannevirke. As we navigate through the details and updates tonight, I appreciate your attention and understanding. So therefore, without further ado, I'll hand over to Roger to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brian, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming out and taking the time tonight to listen to what we have to say. I'm just going to start working through the slides. So this is an outline of the presentation we're going to go through tonight, and really what I'm going to try and do, or what Raj and I are going to try and do, is give you a quick summary of where we've come from and where we're at, to maximise the time for questions. So I'm assuming that's why most of you are here, so we want to allow you that opportunity. But I think there's a few things just to cover off, so we're all singing from the same sheet of music. So I'm just going to cover the history of the impounded supply, talk about the leaks and the temporary repairs that have been completed, what we believe the actual problem is, what's caused the issue that we're dealing with, the risk mitigation measures that are currently underway, the recent extraordinary council meeting and the key outcomes of that meeting, including the funding, expectations for this summer, just some comments around preparing for summer 23-24 and next steps. It's not playing. Here we go. So the impounded supply, as many of you know, was commissioned in 2013. It holds 120 megalitres of water, which is 120,000 cubic metres, or 1.2 million litres of water. So, and that's at full capacity. And when it's full, it's about 12 metres deep. The picture behind you is the impounded supply itself, and most of it was excavated from a pond. Just one part of it had to be filled in, and that's the eastern embankment. Just up there, where they had to cut it out to put in the subsoil drain pipes, so the outlets of the pipes underneath the liner to allow any rainwater to be removed from underneath the dam itself. The structure also has three concrete aspects to it: the inlet, the outlet, and the spillway. The liner itself is made of HDPE. Most people are probably not familiar with that, but it's about 1.5 millimetres thick and very stiff. And it's covered, the whole dam itself is covered with a cover. So it's protected from the sunlight, obviously, from any birds and other creatures. Please excuse me, I need some more skills in operating this device. Now the initial leak, or it was observed in July 2021 that there was increased outflow through the subsoil drains. So the level of water had increased and the reservoir the level of the reservoir was dropping. So after the floating cover was removed, it was identified that the HDPE liner had been shredded near the inlet. So that's where they'd cut it out. And you can see the liner here, probably not particularly well, but it's been shredded. There's a number of holes in the liner itself. So that's one of the lessons we've learnt from the original construction, is that having the water land halfway down the slope is not ideal, and so that'll be rectified in any repairs that are conducted. So the liner where it was damaged was replaced and repaired. However, there continued to be an elevated level of water loss through the subsoil drains. So a remotely operated vehicle was put into the dam to try and identify any tears in the liner itself causing this additional water loss. However, they weren't able, at that time, to find any additional tears. However, they did identify some depressions underneath the liner. So they identified 2 depressions at the time of that inspection, and you can see a picture of one of the depressions on the screen on the right, and on the left you can see approximately where in the dam or under the dam that depression was. And of note, the depression is sitting directly above the main subsoil drain that allows water to exit underneath the liner. Then in May this year, we put another remotely operated vehicle into the dam, and we found 2 tears. So the first tear was about the size of my cell phone, so it's quite a reasonable size, and it was sitting above a large depression. There was also a pinhole tear as well, so pinhole in the liner, located above a second depression. The team also found 3 additional depressions, so there was the original 2, and they found 3 more that must have occurred over that subsequent period. So part of that inspection was to do a complete grid search of the base of the dam to see if they could find any other deterioration. Subsequently, we got in a dive team to repair those tears. And that's a picture of some of the work that they were doing. So we had 4 divers that spent a week working in the impounded supply. Essentially, they had to cut out a piece of liner around where the 2 tears were. They then had to fill the depression underneath the liner with sand, and then they had to put a specially designed cover linked to the original liner. So that has been completed and has been inspected twice. So we've had a remotely operated vehicle in the impound twice since the repairs in June, and both the repairs have held up. So there's no evidence of any additional leaking in the vicinity of either of those repairs. So we're very pleased with the outcome. Since the repairs, we've have been completed, we've continued to observe minor deterioration in the depressions. That deterioration has continued to reduce after each inspection, but there is still minor deterioration occurring. We have not observed any deterioration in the eastern embankment, which was the area of most concern. So no evidence of any deterioration on that embankment. And finally, we saw a reduction of water loss from 25 litres a second down to approximately 3 litres per second, so a significant reduction in water loss. And that loss is sitting at about 2.5 litres a second at the moment. We monitor that every day just to keep a close eye on the status of the impounded supply. Now, if you'd like to refer to the document that was on your seats and look at the picture at the back. So this is the hypothesis that Tonkin and Taylor have provided us, or in terms of what they believe has happened. So the water was coming in the inlet and it was causing the liner below the inlet, so the inlet's about halfway down the embankment, to ripple. And that rippling effect on the liner shredded the liner over time. This then caused water to be able to access directly below the liner. So over time, that water caused the very fine gravel that's directly below the liner, essentially a sand, to be sucked into the 40 millimetre aggregate, so quite large rocks at the base of the subsoil drains. So there was no geothermal mat or any between those two layers of material, and that water sucked that finer soil through the larger rocks at the bottom of the subsoil drains. That then resulted in a depression, and then the depression caused the liner to be put under tension because there was nothing under it. So over an extended period of time, that pressure got to the point where the liner gave way, and the larger tear that we identified occurred on a join. So it's actually a join in the vicinity where that tear occurred, and it just could only take so much weight with the head of water sitting above it, up to 12 metres of water. That's a lot of water, and it eventually gave way. So that then caused the tears in the liner, and then more water was being seeped underneath the liner. So you'll see on the left-hand side of your picture, you'll see step 4, step 5, step 6, and step 7. So these are all things that have been of concern, especially to Tonkin and Taylor, being the dam experts. But as yet, we have seen no evidence of any of this deterioration in those steps. And obviously, a breach of the dam has not occurred. And this is one of the reasons why we've had to do extensive geological investigations. That is to verify or not whether the embankment, especially the eastern embankment, has been undermined at all by that water that has been tracking under the liner. So, water supply risk mitigation measures. We've got a number of measures that we've implemented that are underway to help us manage water supply for Dannevirke. They include the identification of an alternate water sources. So the first location that we investigated was the Alliance Meatworks. The Alliance Meatworks consumes about a quarter of our daily water demand here in Dannevirke. And so we identified if we could get them off, if we could provide them an independent source of water, that would significantly reduce the demand on the overall water supply within Dannevirke. However, unfortunately, the test bore that was sunk there about a month ago was unsuccessful, so it didn't return a good flow or a good enough flow of water to justify any further work in the location of that bore. We are currently investigating some further bores adjacent to the Tamaki River, and this is just southwest of the impounded supply, adjacent essentially to the left-hand side of Laws Road as you head up towards the mountains. So the first bore has been put in. They were actually drilling today, and they went down to about 20 metres. So the first 11 metres was gravel, and then they hit clay and went down about a further 10 odd metres through clay. The anticipated flow of this particular bore is about 12 to 15 litres a second, but we haven't had a chance to verify that. They've now gone away to consider the approach for the second bore, so we're going to put 2 bores in close vicinity. Whether they use a larger drill, because the drilling through the gravel was quite challenging with a 100mm bore. So we expect that they'll do that in the next few days, and then we will need to do some flow tests if it's viable to pursue one or both of those bores. However, the key time to know whether they're going to be successful is February, March, when it's really dry, as to whether we're going to be able to draw an adequate volume of water from either or both those bores. So a great result would be probably around 25 to 30 litres a second. If we could draw that from both those bores, then that would pretty much provide all the water we need for the Dannevirke community. However, if it was a lesser amount, let's say 15 to 20 litres per second, then that would definitely be worth investigating, because that would be a significant additional source of water for Dannevirke, especially during periods of low flow where it's very dry, and also because it's coming from lower down, it's likely to be less turbid, so it's likely to be less dirt in that water, which is one of the challenges we face from the Tamaki River. When there's been a heavy rainfall event, the river water gets very dirty, and that puts a lot of pressure on our treatment plant. We have done extensive leak detection recently in all 4 major towns of the district: Dannevirke, Woodville, Pahiatua and Ikitahuna. Repairs, I understand, have been completed to the networks that the council is responsible for. So we've got onto those leaks and repaired them, but they weren't significant. There were no significant leaks, as I understand, identified in any of the 4 towns, but what leaks were identified have been repaired. We'll now be contacting private property owners where we suspect there might be a leak on their property and asking them to investigate that. So the leak detection work that has been conducted enables individual properties to be identified where there's continuous running water, and that's monitored through the Toby at the front of the property. Continuing with the risk mitigation, demand management, we're we're going to place meter connections on all the takes between the Tamaki River and the impounded supply. So there's a number of farms that are taking raw water from the pipeline, and this is historical, but we need to put a meter on those takes so we understand exactly how much water is being consumed. We're going to purchase an underwater vehicle for the council so that we can regularly check the impounded supply, especially while we have to manage it over the next 12 months until we can get in and actually repair it. But also to enable us to do regular inspections of the dam at Woodville, so very similar but much smaller, and also our reservoirs in Ikitahuna, in Pahiatua and here in Dannevirke. They all need to be investigated or need to be inspected regularly to ensure that they're being maintained well. So that'll be a very valuable resource for us. We'll continue to maintain the impounded supply at a reduced depth. So it's currently being operated at about 8 metres, between 7.5 and 8 metres, and we monitor that depth every day. We're investigating the installation of flow meters on our subsoil drain outlet pipes. So there's a series of pipes that extract the water from underneath the liner, and we're investigating the opportunity or the option of putting flow meters to pick up if any of those pipes should have water flowing flowing through them. The challenge we have is those pipes come into a manhole that's about 18 metres deep, and it's being able to access the information from those flow meters at that depth because it's done electronically. So that's the challenge that we're working through. We're also investigating the condition of the Tamaki River intake. We've recently had the willows up there mown and cleaned out, and we're going to put a camera into the intake itself and inspect those pipes. There is concern that the willows have grown into those pipes and are reducing the flow of water that we can extract out of the Tamaki River. I'd now like to talk about the extraordinary council meeting that occurred on the 31st of October. So there was a number of key outcomes from that meeting. So firstly was the delayed decision to commence the remediation works, primarily to allow the design work to be complete, including the geological investigation and the liner system confirmation. So we're still waiting for the final outcomes of the geological investigation. So there's been 3 investigations. I spoke to Tonkin and Taylor yesterday and today. They're finalising all the results of those 3 investigations. Some of the information or some of the soil samples had to go to Australia, so we had to wait for the results to be returned. And then they're doing an analysis of that information to then provide clear advice as to what does or doesn't need to be done to either the eastern or the western embankments. So there's concern around both embankments, or there's been questions raised, that's probably a better way of describing it, around both embankments, and we need to get that data from the geological investigations to then inform the advice that's provided to council in terms of any repairs to the impounded supply itself. So what this means is there will be a delay until 24-25 construction season before we can actually get in and repair the impounded supply, because we don't have enough time now to do it in the window that we have available between now and probably March, April next year. So given everything that would need to be conducted, so that's removing the liner and the cover, it's then excavating all the subsoil drains and replacing them, rebuilding them essentially, and then putting on a new cover and a new liner and a new cover. We don't have enough of a construction period to do that and be confident that we can finish it before next winter. In addition, a decision was made to purchase a pre-treatment plant, and that's a picture of a pre-treatment plant that belongs to the Tauranga City Council. And essentially the purpose of that plant is to enable us to treat high turbidity water. So when the water gets really dirty in the Tamaki River, our current treatment plant can't treat anything above 10 NTU. So NTU is the measure of dirty water, essentially. And so this capability enables us to treat high turbidity water to ensure that we can provide water to the Dannevirke community. Now, the approach we're taking is that this will be a relocatable capability that could be used elsewhere in the district. It could be sold or it could be used more widely across New Zealand in other emergencies should it be required. So we want to get a valuable asset for the money that is spent, that not only we use to manage the risks that we're dealing with at the moment, but we've got something of value into the future, and then council can decide as to exactly how they'd like to use that. In addition, we're going to purchase a second clip tank, and this is the picture of the clip tank currently at the Pahiatua wastewater treatment plant. So this is a clip tank owned by the District Council, and we're going to relocate this clip tank as well. It's not required at Pahiatua, so we'll have 2 clip tanks in the vicinity of the impounded supply, and the primary purpose of these clip tanks is to hold raw water to store raw water to supplement any high turbidity water, and that's to reduce the impact on the pre-treatment plant. The membrane, the specialist membranes in the pre-treatment plant don't cope with high turbidity water over an extended period of time. So whatever we can supplement and reduce that level of turbidity enables us to better manage the pre-treatment plant itself. It'll also support us with any backwashing. So when there's high turbidity water going through treatment plants, they have to backwash regularly to clean those membranes before they then process water again. So that'll help us with that process. And then finally, we're going to purchase an additional treated water storage tank. So this is the water storage tank in Pahiatua. It was installed by Tasman Tanks, I think 5 or 6 years ago, but quite recently, so it's a recent purchase for the council. So the intent is to install a similar tank to this one. In the vicinity of the current water tank that we have a single concrete reservoir that was built in 1969, just off the end of Cole Street in the vicinity of Blue Gum Lane. So this additional tank will enable us to have at least 48 hours of treated water, stored water for the Dannevirke community. And if we have to, in an emergency, reduce demand, then I hope we'd be able to get sort of at least 4, perhaps 5 days out of the 2 tanks until we could arrange for additional water supply in an emergency. So it significantly increases the resilience of the community in terms of stored, treated water, and it's what's considered best practice across New Zealand. That's the advice that we've been given. I'm now going to hand over to Raj, and he's going to talk about the budgets that have been.
Thank you, Roger. Good evening, everyone. Just got 2 slides that I want to talk to you very briefly about 4 key areas. The budgets have been approved to date. Talk a little bit about the expenses, and then I want to talk a little bit about debt headroom and the terminology that we talk about what debt headroom is. Just want to talk a little bit about cost, the other incidence costs we've incurred, and lastly, just want to talk about how we fund this investment in Dannevirke impounded supply. So first is the budget approved. The total budget that we have approved to date, it's 8.1 million. And Roger talked about the extraordinary meeting that we had where council specifically approved 6.1 for the pre-treatment and the 2 water tanks, which is the raw water and the treated water tanks. The expenditure to date, it's 1.95 million of the total budget that's been approved. Debt headroom. Now, this is a very important, I would say, an indicator for us in terms of council having the ability to borrow to fund its investments in infrastructure. So council uses a local government funding agency who provide funding for local government at preferential rates, lower than what you get from normal banks. So the debt headroom is what we call a covenant, meaning that the funding agency has got a limit to say that this is the limit to which how much council can borrow against its revenue, against its assets, against its rates revenue. So the debt headroom that we have here following council proposed investment of the 8.1, it's leaving it as 13.18 million. However, what we like to do when we're looking at debt headroom is we tend to look forward. So when we look forward to, say, the next financial year, when we include the investments that council is intending to make in the following financial year, our debt headroom drops to about 2.9 million. So what that's telling us is that our ability to go out and borrow for another significant project is reduced because our debt headroom is 2.9 million. A caveat here is this. Council has got limits in terms of its debt headroom, a financial discipline that is imposed on itself. The funding agency has got a different financial limit as well. The funding agency has got a much higher limit for us to borrow. So if we were to say we were to increase our debt headroom to the maximum that's allowed by the funding agency, we could increase our debt headroom to roughly at about 28 million. So there's an ability for Council to do that, but the Council of the Day has decided to maintain some self-discipline and self-constraint by having a lower limit so that we can manage our debt funding. Just want to briefly talk to you about the other cost that we have to consider as well. If you borrow, you got interest cost. And in the current environment with the interest rates high, the estimate of the interest cost based on the borrowing of the approved 8.1 million for the first year is 196, for the second year is 392. And why do we have two different numbers there? The assumption that we make that in the year one, when we are drawing down the loan, we don't draw the loan down at day one. We only draw the loan as and when the contracts or projects progresses. So that's keeping our interest costs as low as we can. So that's why in the year of the construction, we would say that the project will complete at year end, and during the year, we only will incur interest costs at a most roughly 50% of the total debt. That's why year one, we have a lower interest cost. In year two is when we say that the project is completed, we've drawn down on the full loan, we pay the full year interest cost. Depreciation is the other element the council have, and what we tend to do is that we fund. Depreciation for us is the asset renewals, meaning that if we invest in infrastructure, you need to renew the asset. So we put some money aside so that it's for asset renewals, maintenance, and also eventual replacement of the asset. Just a caveat there in the last bullet point is that we have not estimated what the operating costs would be associated with the capital investments. We're just looking at the 8.1 million approved capital expenditure to invest in the repair, investigation, pre-treatment, and the 2 water tanks. The last one is funding. How does Council fund investments in its water infrastructure? It's funded through debt funded, primarily for the 8.1 million that's here is primarily funded from debt funding. How do we then fund that from a ratepayer's point of view? It's funded through the water targeted rates. And the way Council funds the water targeted rates is that Council has got 7 schemes right across the district, and what we tend to do is that we use what we call a district targeted rates. So all ratepayers or all properties that are connected to Council's water scheme in our 7 water schemes do pay a fair equal share of investments in our water schemes. We have estimated that just based on the capital investments, we're estimating about $100 in addition to the current rates that we're paying for the water rates. Currently, in the annual plan, our water rates per annum, it's at $700, including a GST. By taking on board the 8.1 million, the additional amount that we're adding on to, it's about $100. The caveat here is this. The assumption that we have made is that we are funding the debt repayment over 20 years. That's what Council, in terms of its approach to most of the debt. There's an ability, and the councils in the council workshop did ask us to look to say, can we fund the repayment of the debt over a much longer period? And yes, we can. And I did some rough calculation, and if you were to fund this investment, this 8.1 million over a longer period, and let's say you fund it over 50 years, the rates requirement would be about $68 per annum. That would be the increase. But we need to balance the risk. In a high inflation, in a high interest rates environment, extending the debt for a longer period would just mean that you're paying more interest. So we just got to be conscious about the length of the period in which we extend the debt repayment. Now I hand over to Roger.
Thanks for your patience, folks. We're very nearly finished. Okay. The next slide is around expectations for summer. So I think we all appreciate that given the long-term weather forecast and a very dry summer that under an El Nino weather forecast pattern or weather pattern that we're likely to face water restrictions this summer, and quite possibly not just here in Dannevirke. If it is dry as they're predicting, then we're going to have to watch water very closely right across the whole district, not just here in Dannevirke. And boil water notices are a possibility, but the pre-treatment plant is our, I suppose, a key tool that we want to use to try and reduce the likelihood of those boil water notices. It's probably not so much likely during summer, because that's when the high turbidity occurs, and that's during heavy rainfall events. But especially once we head into winter, to reduce the likelihood of those boil water notices. Now, what can be done? Please, can I encourage you, while we still have water and we still had another heavy rain this afternoon, still got very cool temperatures for this time of year, is to wash your house or fill your swimming pool or anything else like that needs to be done. So that should be done now, and I would strongly encourage you not to leave it too much later. Who knows what the weather's going to do? It's been all over the place. A lot of people are looking at purchasing tanks for their gardens, and you can do that quite cheaply and link them to one of your downpipes. So that's definitely an option that's worth considering, which at least provides you perhaps some water for your garden. And in an emergency, then you could drink it as well. So that's always an option. If we can encourage you to repair any leaks that you find on your property, that makes a big difference to managing our water demand. And please report any other leaks that you identify. And I know a lot of people do report them, and there's often frustration about how long it takes to get them repaired. Just so you're aware, we've got two teams that do this work here in the district, and they might be down in Eketahuna one day and then back to Dannevirke the next, or Norsewood. So they're all over the place, and they try and get there as quickly as they can, but we do have limited resources to repair those leaks. Finally, next steps. So we will continue to monitor the impound supply, and every day we have someone visually inspecting the embankments of the impound supply, and we're monitoring the outflow, we're monitoring the depth, and we have some piezometers, so some special monitoring equipment that have been installed in bores to monitor the movement of water through the soil. So there's extensive monitoring occurring on a daily basis of the impound supply, and that will continue. We're going to procure and install the additional pre-treatment, raw water storage and treated water storage that I spoke about. We will get the finalised assessment of the geological investigations, and that will inform or help inform critical decisions around the viability of repairing the impounded supply itself. We will continue with the detailed design of the repairs, and part of that process is to correct any deficiencies that we have identified in the current design of the impounded supply. And there's going to be a number of improvements that are built into that detailed design to ensure that we can make maximum use of the impounded supply in the future. And finally, preparation for summer, and the Three Waters team within Council will be meeting on a regular basis to assess our water storage capabilities and our upcoming weather forecasts, so we can preempt any concerns we have around that provision of water and try and manage that effectively, especially if it does start getting really dry. So that'll be critical we anticipate that'll be critical for this summer. Okay, that's more than enough from me, and thank you, Raj. So now we'd like to take your questions. If I can just encourage you, please, to focus on questions around the impounded supply. So that's the purpose of this evening's meeting, is primarily around the impounded supply and any concerns or questions you have. If there are questions relating to other issues, then Sharon's going to put them on the board, as Mayor Tracy has mentioned, and we can come back to those once we've concluded around the impounded supply. So thank you very much for your attendance, for your attention, and we'll open the floor and call on our two mic people, please, from the community board. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks, Roger.
Like I said, so Councillor Sharon is going to just record any other questions that aren't directly related to the impounded supply, and we'll address those secondary at the end. I will need to close at 8:30 because we did go a bit over time last time. We got into a little bit of trouble at the hub, but we'll keep the Q&A open until then. So we've got Board Member Pat Walsh and Board Member Terry Hines are both on the mics. So if anyone's got a question, feel free to raise your hand. And I think, Pat, you have got one that's already been pre-submitted as well.
Just curiosity over the figures. So in the paper, it had that the annual figure per year was about $69 per annum per ratepayer. I see up on the board tonight it's about $100. But those figures they're based on the 6.1 million that have been approved. Now we've still got, as I would imagine it, another 30 million to be spent on the bores, on repairing the dam, etc. So once the true figure of what's been spent is taken into account, my figures are that it's going to be, based on the figures in the paper, it's going to be $378 annually for water alone as an increase without anything else.
Yeah, it is, and the scary part with this, and you would have heard me talk about this before, with the change in regulations from Taumata Arawai, actually that's not over yet. Those regulation changes in compliance and monitoring and wastewater all get added on top of that. We've just had a change in government, and they have changed. They're going to repeal and replace the three waters into local water well done. We don't know what that looks like at the moment, but the funding model within the country is broken for water and wastewater. We're not the only council facing this. Not sure if you want to...
So what is your final figure then of what you are estimating that this is going to end up at?
We don't know. Based on those geological results that come through from the soil testing, that'll form one part of the equation, and that's just Dannevirke water. We've got Eketahuna wastewater consent that's been granted, Woodville wastewater consent. So as we find them out, we'll certainly let you know. I can give you some of those consent figures around some of the wastewater if you're interested in it. But for Dannevirke, we don't know what that final figure is.
So going forward then, does the council... You must have an assumption based on what the rough figures you've done is as to what that may end up?
Roger, do you want to answer that? And then we might, just in fairness, Brian, we'll give you another crack. So, thanks, Roger.
Yeah, no, Brian, we don't know how much it's going to be, and that's why we stopped at this point to allow that geological investigation to be completed. So one of the decisions was to commit money at this point and rush ahead with the repairs over this construction period, but the decision was made, no, we've got to stop because we don't have all the information. So if it's going to be extortionately expensive, then we're going to have to review the viability of the impounded supply. That will be my recommendation to council, but we won't know that until we know the condition of both those embankments, primarily the eastern embankment, but also now there's a question mark around the western embankment. So we need to wait for that information. So no, we don't know how much it's going to cost, and that's one of the reasons why we said let's stop, because we don't want to commit a whole lot of money and then find it goes on and on and on. We need to, I think, well, from my perspective, it's critical I can tell council clearly about what they're up for so they can make an informed decision, and that's why we made a decision not to rush ahead. Yeah.
And if I just add to that, and I think it's why we also trying to do that is exactly to answer, Brian, your questions about the cost on the ratepayer. So we want to be quite clear that we have an opportunity once you determine what the cost is, if you're proceeding with the repair of the dam, what the cost is, and have the ability to engage and consult with the community as well. So that's important for us to do that pause. So that's why we separated the project into two. The immediate investment we have to do now in the pre-treatments and the raw water tanks and the treated water tanks as important critical parts for us to carry on what we call the phase 2, which is identify what the remedial work is required, and if it's significant, then we'll come back in front of the community to consult on options.
Thank you.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Katrina Shanks, I've just got a couple of questions. You've talked about what's been... first of all, I want to say thank you for the presentation. I think it was really good, and it gave us a really good understanding and detail of the work that you've put in to date, so thank you for all that clarification. It's really appreciated. I've got a couple of questions around the timelines that you've got in place. Obviously, there's frustrations in the room after having 2.5 years of still no resolution and not knowing what that resolution's going to be. So my question to you is, what are your timelines around the geological report? When do you expect that back? Who's going to do the different scenarios that you'll have in front of you and the costing of that? What's your timelines around that? And how do you know you're going to be in a position in a year's time to start the work when it's already been 2.5 years?
Okay. I'll hand over to Roger and he'll be able to answer and give you some timelines on that through Tonkin and Taylor. Can I ask one more?
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Some really good questions, thank you. We're expecting the geological investigation back next week, so they're just finalising all that information, as I mentioned, and then they're doing an analysis and going to provide recommendations. So we'll receive those recommendations definitely before Christmas, but I've been advised we should have them next week. And then we need to present them to Council and outline to Council what the options are in terms of moving forward. Now, it is possible that we're going to have to do more geological investigation. I really hope not. But one of the challenges with the process that we've been following is that we've got a peer reviewer. So Tonkin and Taylor are doing all the design work, but we've got another independent company, a company called DamWatch, that assess all the work they've been doing. And this is one of the lessons that we've learned, the importance of, I suppose, having an independent assessment. And there is a difference of opinion between these two organisations. So our challenge is to walk that path and try and get compromise around and work out what's essential, what's not. So this is where there's still some uncertainty, but I've been putting pressure on Tonkin and Taylor to say, listen, we really need some answers here. This is important because we then need to complete the detailed design so we are ready for the next construction season, ready to go. And we'll be in a much better position than we would have been in this season. So I hope that answers your question.
With all respect, it actually didn't answer my question at all. I asked what the timelines were. You've obviously got a critical pathway to get to the point of putting the project in place and getting the wheels down. So what is the timeline on you? When do you expect the council to meet again to look at a final report? When do you expect the review to be done on the geological investigation report that you're getting done? What are your critical timelines? And when's your last critical timeline that you have to meet to be able to go to construction for next summer?
Well, I'd expect that we would have the review completed before Christmas and be ready to present a report to Council early in the new year. So on the basis that we receive the reports in the next couple of weeks, then that's feasible. And then we need, what we've identified is that we need to do a reset around the design. So we've already commenced the design. It's about 25 to 35% to 30% through the design process. We need to sit down with our two, both the peer reviewer and Tonkin and Taylor, and we need to do a reset with the design process. And until we've done that reset, we won't have a definitive timeline. And given that there's a difference between the two parties, it's critical that we do that reset so we're clear on what issues there is agreement and what issues there's disagreement.
I've just got a couple of other short questions, if that's okay with everybody in the room. I know I'm holding the mic, sorry about that. So you talked about breach of a dam. If there was a breach of the dam, are there any residents at risk?
No, the potential impact classification assessment that's been completed has indicated that there are no residents at risk, and that was completed on the basis that the impounded supply was 12 metres deep or filled to capacity, because it's sitting at about 7.5 to 8 metres deep. We're 100% confident that there's no residents, no homes will be at risk. So that water would come down the Makirikiri, I think it's the Makirikiri stream, but we expect that it would be very shallow by the time it actually got towards State Highway 2. So yeah, we are confident of, and that analysis has been done and been checked. So, yep.
Stay there, Roger.
Thanks, Craig.
Based on recent reports in the papers, we've read that there's been an engineering oversight on the dam. When I look back at the whole thing to go forward, and Tonkin and Taylor did a overview report in 2012, 2013, they'd earmarked 3 risk concerns of different grading: seismic activity, seepage, and that liners leak. And now we know that over and above that, you've got problems where the geotechnical cloth wasn't laid on the drains, exacerbated the problem. Isn't that just pouring a lot more money to have a full repair on the dam rather than look at other options? I'm just concerned we're putting more money down the dam hole.
Well, the question is around the cost of the alternate options, Craig, and as you see, to install or to build a 5 to 6 megalitre tank for treated water is about $2 to $2.5 million. So this is where we need all the information, so we can present that to council and they can make an informed decision about the viability of actually repairing it. But the repair process will bring the dam up to the latest standards. So there's new dam legislation being introduced in May this year. It's already being written, and so part of the detailed design process is to ensure that the impound supply would meet the latest legislation. I don't know if you're aware, there's also new seismic guidelines that have just come out very recently, and the whole industry at the moment is grappling as to how they actually implement those seismic guidelines, and they've just received some advice from MB around that. So yeah, there's some definite challenges in terms of, I suppose, future-proofing this capability. But the key thing, I think, Craig, is if they had put that geotextile material between those two, the soil, the clay immediate below the liner, and then that gravel, then I don't think would be in the position we're in now, or definitely not as bad as we are now. So, and that's one of the key components that would go into the repairs. There's a lady just up here, Pat.
Hello, I'm Valerie. I'm a country girl, and we've always been used to tanks, and you've talked about us having a tank so that we can water the garden. Could we not enlarge upon that and make tanks for everyone, somehow augmented by what we're going to be having to pay yearly over and above the rates? And couldn't these tanks be topped up by the reservoir? Sure.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. One of the challenges, though, is that the council has a legal obligation to provide safe drinking water. And if we were to, I suppose, to change that approach or that paradigm and primarily rely around tanks, individual tanks on properties, it's the challenge around ensuring that the council meets that legal obligation. Because obviously it's on a private person's property, and the council doesn't want to get involved in having to repair or to maintain or monitor individual tanks. So it's definitely something that's been talked about, but there's just some, well, that's one of the considerations that we need to work through in terms of taking that approach.
And are you going to work through those?
I think that's something that we need to get advice from Te Mata Arawai. But
What does that mean? What is that word?
Well, I'll be honest, ma'am, the focus has really been on trying to get to a point where we can repair the impounded supply. And we've had limited capacity to look at, in detail, at a whole lot of other options at this point. So that would be something that we would need to make a priority and then to investigate in more detail.
Right.
So just for our water regulator, so previously it was the Ministry of Health that was overseeing water regulations and water compliance. That's now shifted, well, about a year and a half, maybe even longer, to Te Mata Arawai. So that's the name of the organisation.
Yeah, to whom it may concern, I'm Dennis. I live in Carlson Street. You say that the wells that were dug at the Abattoirs or Alliance were unsuccessful. If I get a digger in and go down 2 metres at my place, I will strike water. Not recently, but yeah, when I built the house, the water table was 2 metres. Okay, no, not for the second part. Council put in this 5-kilometre piece of piping that was going to go to Alliance from up here by Phillips Motors. It laid there for a year, then they come along and they cut it up and they took it away. What's the guts there? Thank you.
Sorry, I can't answer your second question, so I'm going to look, someone else can. But the first question, so the two key things around a bore are capacity and quality. And so there could very well be water, beneath your property. But it depends how much water, and it depends what the quality is, and it depends whether that water is consistent right through the year. So the advice is, or the guidance is, that to actually prove a bore of that nature takes about 12 months. So you need to monitor the bore for 12 months to ensure that you've got adequate both capacity and quality of water, because obviously you still have to meet the Te Mata Arawai guidelines around that quality of water, and Queenstown has experienced challenges in that area before.
My place for that heavy water, all my water goes
Right.
no matter how deep the so-called are.
So just for clarity as well, so water was found in the bore, but as Roger said, it's about the quantity. So if you're looking at 3 to 4 litres per second to the average person, that's a huge amount of water that's coming out of the bore. But in terms of running the meatworks of the Alliance, they need at least triple that. So you are looking around that 15 litres per second, which is a huge amount of water. So yes, there is water under the ground, but once again, it's the volume and the capacity of being able to get that water out. So the water that we have found just is not fit for purpose.
And the pipe?
And just that there was also another property that we looked at privately that had a spring on it that was also investigated, and the same result with the quantity of water. The pipe you're talking about would have been in the 2020 drought, and that was paid for by the National Emergency Management Agency, paid for that pipe to go in, and the plan was that if the town got that short, they would train water in. That pipe was laid in the rail corridor with permission from New Zealand Rail. After 12 months, when that pipe wasn't used, the instruction came from New Zealand Rail that pipe was to be removed. So that's why it was cut up and taken away. So we didn't pay for it, but we were no longer allowed to keep it there either. Disappointing, absolutely. We have used parts of that pipe and repurposed the cut up pieces. We were allowed to do that. Then we've got one over here.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. It's right. Roger, have you looked or had investigated a supersized treatment plant. Don't worry about moving a plant, leave it up there, or 2 plants so you can backwash and still treat, and do away with the reservoir altogether.
No, I haven't. That hasn't been put forward as an option by the experts so far. So the sense was, or the advice we've received, is that the impound supply is a really valuable asset, given the volume of water that it's able to hold. So if it's functioning properly, it's an extremely valuable asset. And we already have a pre-treatment plant that enables us to process turbidity, 10 NTU turbidity water from the impound supply. So the ideal solution, because we already have the impound supply, is to repair that, and then we don't need to do anything additional to the pre-treatment plant. The question is, how much is it going to cost to actually repair the impounded supply? So that's the big question that we're wanting to answer as soon as we can, as an alternative. And if, for example, the bores on Lewis Road would prove to be successful, depending on that level of turbidity, that may be a better approach to take. So I suppose we've still got some water to go under the bridge in terms of that final decision around that method supply. But that's the advice we've got, is that it's a valuable resource. There's been a lot of money spent on it. We want to maximise what it provides to the community if we can.
Is it on? Yeah. Hi. Thanks for coming tonight. I just wanted to ask, change the subject a little bit and get onto the subject of the loan that we're talking about over here for this project. I want to ask a couple of questions about that loan. One of them is really who is going to supply the loan for this project. Also, are any of the residences in Dannevirke going to be used as collateral for that loan? I just really want to have some more information and detail about how that loan works.
So the loan will be through the local government funding agency that Raj mentioned. Raj, do you want to talk about collateral? It doesn't work like that on individuals' home, but Raj, do you want to talk about that?
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Thanks for the question. The funding agency, in terms of security, and I think if we use a different word for collateral, security, when you take a home loan, you give a security. For the funding agency, it is secured against what we call debentures. That is council's ability to rate. Because Council to the Local Government Act has an ability to rate, so that's our revenue. So the LGFA gets security from the councils to what we call debentures, which is securing our loan against our ability to rate. So this, so it's not against infrastructure. Council do not declare or secure its infrastructure to the LGFA, the funding agency.
Good evening, I'm Chris Cape. I've got a brief question about water tanks. Has the council got any plan to subsidise water tanks for private individuals, private properties? I bought my 1,000-litre box tank from the carpet factory at the end of Trafalgar Street, and that's catching water from my garage. So would the council consider a subsidy for members of the community to install some sort of catchment system, a tank of some sort, to offset the problems that are going to come with this dry weather? Thank you.
The council hasn't discussed subsidising it. I did just on the back of an envelope, sort of crunched some numbers about what that would look like just for Denneberg. And when I looked at that number, and I looked at the amount of money that we've got to pay over the whole scheme of things, actually I didn't progress any further because actually we had to do that district-wide. The price of those has considerably come down, but we also haven't had that request. We did go out in the annual plan with the community of Ormonville and talk about water tanks there. The uptake wasn't huge, and previous, if I go back sort of 10 years, council was at one stage selling those, and it was really hard to even sell them at cost to people. So no, that conversation hasn't taken place. If that's something that people are interested in, when we go through this long-term plan, we open that up, give us that feedback.
Thank you, Mayor. I reckon necessity is the mother of invention, and when necessity calls, we need to do something about it. Maybe we're not there yet, but we will be there.
I've got a question. Where's anyone from the regional council here? They seem to be the ones that are throttling our water supply by reducing what they perceive to be low river flows. They've riparian planted the river and let the gravels build up quite a large amount in the Tamaki and restricted the amount of water flowing on the surface. Why wouldn't the cheapest option for the council to push back against the regional council about what they perceive as low water flows, so we don't actually have this problem? So we actually take the water out of the river?
Yep, I agree with you, John.
Well, what's happening with that?
So, firstly, we have a consent that is in place. That would have to be an amendment to that consent. Any time we go into emergency flows, so we are working closely with the regional council. That water consent does come up in a couple of years, and if there's one thing that I could say, and that is please be involved in that consent so that we don't get any further restrictions, because I don't want to see another consent like Woodville, and we've already got quite a tough consent. So they'll be looking to make those changes, but if people can be involved, that would be great, and I'll make sure, I have been talking to our regional council about around fresh water, so I'll make sure that we get someone from regional council here next time as well.
Roger, you spoke about the treatment plant and the relocation of storage tanks. Is that definitely going to happen, and by what time will that be actually operational?
The particular treatment plant that we're talking about is constructed in containers. And they're just finalising the design of those containers at the moment. The intent that it will be installed by April, May next year, but we intend to move the clip tanks earlier than that. So we want to get those clip tanks, we can get those clip tanks in position probably early in the new year, before the demand on clip tanks, especially from farmers, really ramps up, as I understand. So that's the intent around the timelines.
So we won't have it here by summer?
No, we won't have it here by summer. No. Sorry?
I say heaven help us.
Well, we hope, well, it depends what the weather does, obviously, during the summer, but if it is dry, then the pre-treatment plant isn't so essential during the summer because we won't have that higher turbidity. It really depends on what the weather decides to do this summer. Yeah.
Roger, they go away. Roger.
I just wanted to add one thing to the previous question, and it's important that the impounded supply will still be in service. So it is status quo in terms of the impounded supply. So we're going to go through this summer with a supply. So so we're not just relying on our treatment plants. So I just want to re-emphasise that point. The impounded supply will remain in place until we either get approval to proceed with the remedial repairs, and that will probably happen at the start of the next construction season in November, and the additional monitoring of it just to ensure operate as is, but we're confident that it will take us through to the next construction season.
Roger. The clip-on tanks, or the clip tanks, where are they going to be positioned?
The intent is to position them just to the south of the treatment plant.
So that's on lower ground where everything's got to be pumped?
The advice, my understanding is it won't need to be pumped.
So you're talking of the flat land down by the road?
No, just immediately behind the pre-treatment.
Oh, right up on the top?
Right up on the
so
top.
So 100% of that would naturally gravity back into the treatment plant?
That's my understanding, Brian, but I'd have to confirm that. But yeah, otherwise, why would we put them in? It doesn't make sense if we've got to pump everything into the treatment plant.
Exactly what I'm asking, because I really, my personal thinking would have been that they actually go up at where the intake is. Then the whole thing is gravity, 25 metre of full, which means great pressure, no pumping.
And that has been one of the recommendations, that they are placed in the gallery.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Or in the vicinity of the gallery.
Hello, hopefully a not too difficult question. And I don't want to sound alarmist, but I'm just wondering, what is your plan, or are you planning for like a worst case scenario? So we have a really dry summer, low flow, and then there's a earthquake. And like that kind of scenario, because we do get earthquakes and we are going to have dry weather. So I'm just wondering how you're going to plan for that worst case scenario, and could you put it on the website so that we can go back and check what the plan is in case anything like that happens?
Sure, I think that if there's a serious earthquake, it won't just be Dennyberg that's going to have challenges. So the key is to build that resilience as quickly as we can. Because a lot of the pipe work right across the district is in some cases over 100 years old. So we don't want a significant earthquake just at this point. But yeah, that's a very good question. And so you're interested in seeing that on the website, is that right? Okay.
Roger. You say here you'll know the viabilities of the bores by the end of the year. If those bores are viable, you won't need the pre-treatment plant, will you? Because the turbidity out of them, if it's adequate and below the standards that you want, by blending it with the dirty water, or the high turbidity water, you don't need the pre-treatment plant. That's what we do in Paeatua.
Yeah, I suppose the issue is we don't know whether those bores are going to be successful or not. So we're betting all our options at the moment because we can't afford not to.
Yeah, and we'll know by the end of the year, it says here.
Well, we hope to know, but again, it's the key thing will be the viability of that bore probably in March, April, or February, March next year, if it is very dry. So we're still able to draw, let's say, 20 to 25 litres per second out of those bores. Yeah. That'll be the key question. The other need for the pre-treatment plant is if we do have, if the condition of the impounded supply deteriorates, then that pre-treatment plant becomes really critical. So that's the other reason why we have continued to pursue, investigate or commence the purchase of that pre-treatment plant. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to provide water during high turbidity events if the impounded supply is no longer available.
And that's if the bores aren't viable.
If the bores aren't viable, but we've got to get enough water out of those bores to be totally dependent on them.
Correct. You need about 50 litres a second.
60. Yeah, 60 litres a second. Any more questions, folks? There's one over here.
G'day, Simon Marshall. It follows on from the previous question. If those are successful, those takes, are they exempt from consent?
No, they'd have to be included in the current consent. So at the moment, we've got consent to take 110 litres per second out of the Tamaki River. If those bores were viable but couldn't replace the whole take, so we still have to take water from the existing gallery, but we could utilise those bores to supplement, especially during periods of high turbidity, then we've got to include that total take within the 110 litres per second. So that's during high flow, so that reduces during low flow.
Right, so during low flow, the same rules apply at that point as it does at the top gallery?
Correct, yeah, we can only take so much in
That's a
total
shame.
out of the Tamaki River, yeah, it is. It is.
Just a general question, I'm probably going back a bit here, but this sad and sorry saga didn't start in the last 3 years, it started long before that. As long as you guys keep denying it, I suppose it's hard to believe. However, 2 words come to mind, guarantees and liabilities. Now, was there any guarantee regarding the product, i.e. the liner? I haven't heard a thing on it. And was there any guarantee given by the engineering staff involved? I guess they were so-called experts as well. And any liabilities that may come from that?
I can talk about the liner. Any guarantees for the liner is null and void because the liner was the outcome was the liner was stretched over depression. So it was never designed to be put in that particular situation. And neither was it designed to be rippled in the way it was, so it's not designed to have that water coming onto it and consistently flooding it. So we wouldn't, there'd be no point in taking the liner company to court, for example, because the circumstances under which the liner was placed was never guaranteed, I suppose, in the first place. So I can only answer the liner piece.
To the second part of the question, the liability of those that were involved in the initial development of the impounded supply, I believe there isn't any liability. So they were, engineers and they designed it and they got those. I guess they've had this confirmed through the building consent, so it has been inspected by the relevant people. So my view is that no, there wouldn't be any liability going forward. The consultants that we have now do have their limited liability insurance, so that is a requirement of any consultant that we work with. So if there is something fundamentally that they get wrong, then we believe there's an avenue to follow that up. We have raised guarantees and warranties, etc., with our designers and those that are involved, so they're well aware of that. But certainly liability going forward, we believe we're covered.
Just an attachment to that, Brian, can I ask a question? I know it's a while ago when the design of the dam was done. Was that done externally or internally at the council? Was there a combination of that at that time? There must be documents that show that, right?
I believe it was largely designed in-house by engineers.
Can I just remind you, you've got, I think there was one pre-submitted question. Do you have a copy of that, just so that we don't forget that one? One of the councillors might as well, just while if someone looks for that pre-submitted one, and we'll move on to the next one. Or I'll have a look through my file. Yeah. Have you got a copy of it, Sharon? Yeah, we've got one here and one in front.
Thank you. Yes? Is there a possibility that there'll be a further meeting? Will we include Tonkin Taylor in the meeting so that as ratepayers we can hear from the horse's mouth?
Yes, our commitment is everything goes onto the website, and as soon as we've got any further decisions, that we will come back to the public. So yes, it was a decision not to have Tonkin and Taylor here just while those Tonkin and Taylor and Dam Watch are doing that bit of a peer review and waiting for those results. But yes, Tonkin and Taylor were here at the previous meeting, and one of the key parts for me there was just to hear them saying yes, proceed, the dam is worth doing this investigation on.
Okay, just the other thing about the tanks. We're having to boil our water, I presume, this summer again, as we have been in the past. What would be the difference between the water that we would have in a tank and the fact that the water that comes to us it has to be boiled in the summer.
If you're hooked up to a tank, it's really around Taumata Arawai and those drinking water standards, and being able to, and we do have this a bit at Pongaroa where people can mix the water, so depending, you're living in the country, so you're on your own water anyway? No?
I have been, yeah, but I'm not in the country now, so it does really concern me. But I think that, you know, we didn't die of typhus, so I presume that our water, you know, we had it checked, and I thought that we could still do that. I mean, if we're having, the water is horrible in the summer that we're having to boil. It's brown and ghastly, so I don't see the difference.
So just in regards to bore water notice for the Dannevirke Township, so I think we've had one bore water notice in the 3 years that I was here. Now that was in relation to, there was a high turbidity rain event, so that's when the river was over 100, so very, very murky. And then at that point the impounded supply was very low, so we couldn't draw enough water out of the impounded supply to mix it with the turbid. So that's why that bore water notice was issued on that occasion. I think it was about 18 months ago or 2 years ago now. We're reasonably confident that there shouldn't be a need, you know, touch wood, to be honest, but there shouldn't be a need to issue bore water notices. When that does happen, it's usually because there's not enough water in the impounded supply to supplement the high turbidity. So over the summer period, we're hoping that that we'll get less of these sort of high rain events, which should minimise the risk of getting water notices going forward.
The lights on a car outside Tyro 2. Who's got that? The lights are on.
We can pose that question to Taumata Arawai for you as well.
I don't know everyone.
Oh, we've just got one question. John's got a question over here, and they'll bring the mic. They'll bring the mic to you. Just one at the front. John.
My question is, with the hundreds of hectares of pine trees being planted in the town water supply catchment, will the pine pollen be removed by the filtration system? And is the council actually doing anything to protect the source of the water from being completely planted in pine trees, which, when it comes down to low flows in the summer, will greatly increase the effect of low flow down the rivers because of the pine trees?
I can answer part of that for you, John, and then I can't answer the water treatment one around the pollen, but that is giving people concern. So council now has the ability, the government gave us the ability to grant consent, so we can look at all of those implications for that and have some control over what gets planted around our water systems. One of the facts that, and I don't know if this is I found it hard to believe, was just the amount of water that a tree used in comparison to a town. So we certainly are working on that, and I've had discussions with the team around the planting that you're talking about. John, Roger, do you know around the pollen? That's not one I do know the answer to.
So the cover, is it John? Yeah, the cover, John, obviously reduces the excess of pollen into and the filter, the sand filters at the treatment plant. So all the water goes through a series of sand filters, and that's designed to pick up all those sort of things and remove them. And then, so if there is heavy pollen, there'd be increased backwash to remove that pollen from the filter process. But that's part of the filter process, is to remove those sort of items from the water.
Thank you. We moved in here 2.5 years ago, and to me the council was not up to scratch because nobody bothered to leave a note in the letterbox or any message from the council telling us to boil water and not to drink it straight from the tap. Now, we didn't like the taste, and we didn't feel 100% well, and I think that was very poor thinking on the council's part, that new residents were not informed of the situation. And tonight, today, we rang the council just checking about this meeting, where and the time, and your telephone receptionist did not know one thing about it. Now, that's 2 failures from the council, and both of them I consider quite bad. I'd like to see an improved information going on between the council and us. Thank you.
Thanks. Firstly, the Chief Executive's just asked what time you made that call, and he'll look into that. When we have a boiled water notice, and if there's a difference between precautionary, but a boiled water notice in Danneberg, the communications team have a town layout. All staff that are available do go out, as well as councillors, community board members, iwi, and all our volunteer organisations. And actually we do letter drop, so if you see me afterwards, I'll have a look and make sure. So everyone's given a quadrant, and I know myself, I've been out with many councillors doing that and getting those out fast. We have, so the notice goes out to the radios, we hit the streets straight away with those notices, we go and see the businesses, we get that broadcast. But one of the other things, just because obviously people don't check their mailboxes every day now, with mail not being delivered every day, is, how can we improve that? So if you've got some ideas, but the other one is whether, we actually use a loudspeaker and go through the streets. So we are constantly reviewing how that is to make sure that we do get those messages out to people. So I apologise that you had that, but if you give me your address, we'll look it up. Brian. Oh, sorry, Brian. I think they've just got the pre-submitted question.
This is from Craig Watson. Sorry, I am unable to attend as I'm overseas during this time. Can you tell me and the community what steps you have to be taken in talks and correspondence with central government, both McNulty and Butterick, about this major problem we have here in our water supply? Years of neglect, patch up, fixes, rate increases that are not sustainable, making no incentive for investment for growth. Have you had the conversation about, sorry, it's not worded properly, with or without Three Waters, if it goes ahead or not? If it goes ahead, they fix it, or they own it, fix it and give you the money for the assets. If it doesn't go ahead, we keep it and ask central government to give us our money back to fix it. Either way, it needs to be fixed.
Thanks for that. So MP Kieran McAnulty has been kept informed right the way through. Even if it comes down to a boiled water notice, I'm straight on a message and letting him know around that. I've requested Mike Butterick so we can give him a briefing and keep him up to date. Obviously we had a lot of conversations with Kieran around Three Waters and the importance of that local voice to us. We were part of Communities for Local Democracy, which has fed in and worked with government around some of the alternatives to the model that they had mandated. That still remains, but with the new government they will repeal that legislation and replace it with the Better Water Well Done, or Local Water Well Done. We don't know at this moment what that looks like, but there is a model that the Hawke's Bay have put forward. They were looking at, towards the end, a more regionalised model, so the chief executives are all working around that, because the way that we fund this is a conversation that has to happen throughout the country, and we can't keep doing things the same. But with the future of local government, we don't know what that looks like here. We'll keep everybody informed of those conversations, and we still don't know what the new $1.2 billion infrastructure fund looks like either. So hopefully that helps, and thanks for submitting that question online. Sorry, Terry, you've got one up here, and Brian.
Brian, you said that Tonkin Taylor gave a limited liability, I think you said, over their work. Now, when Dewey was here at the previous meeting, I asked her over a guarantee of any description, to which she said they do not give one. The only thing that they gave is a producer statement, which, quite frankly, is worth nothing anyway. And she was categoric that they give no form of guarantee on this.
Thanks, Brian. There are two different things. So guaranteeing your work and actually having limited liability insurance are quite different. So I worked at a previous council where there were issues with some infrastructure that was built, then gives the council the ability to sue that company for it. Generally, companies will have their own limited liability to be able to pay for that, but there would be a process. I doubt anyone that will try and defend themselves, but what we're saying here is that, by using a consultant with, really established companies, if there's something fundamentally wrong and there's evidence to prove on this, you can sue any company, whether they've got limited liability or not. Would they stand up here and say, we guarantee our work for 100 years? Unlikely.
Okay, so a question then. Given the fact that there was a peer review done on the previous day...
I'm just wondering if you can use the microphone, please.
So, given the fact that there is a peer review done on the previous dam after it was designed in-house, so would there not be a liability back on the people who peer reviewed it for having got that wrong? No, it wasn't Tonkin and Taylor. It was the outfit in Auckland that done the peer review. Tonkin and Taylor done the review for Wonkawa Waikato Regional Council.
I think that the reality here first, though, is we've got to actually understand what has actually gone wrong. And I think Roger mentioned this earlier on. The design standards of today have changed to what the design standards in 2012, 2013 were. So you could have built something to that standard on that particular day that did fail like this has 10 years later. Doesn't mean it didn't meet the standards at the time. Everything increases over time, so the new standards are a lot higher now than what they were back then. So to prove that that design failed based on those standards, I think would be very difficult.
No, very easy, and I'll tell you for why. At the previous meeting when Dewey was here, I raised the matter over the cloth above the stones, of which she said that back then it was not trade practice. That was totally incorrect. It was definitely trade practice. And that was the total failure of this dam overall.
Look, I'm not going to get into a debate about that particular issue now. There will be, as we've mentioned before, a time and place to review that in more detail. But going by what we have at the moment, our belief is that it's unlikely, but we can investigate that a little bit further.
What would you say is unlikely?
Sorry, what was that?
What are you saying is unlikely?
Unlikely that you would prove that in a court of law if that was put forward, if we were to sue another company.
I would have thought it was extremely easy, but anyway.
Yeah, as I said, let's not get into that debate tonight.
Just down here at the front.
Brian, the advice I've received is that that wasn't code, so that geotextile material between those two type, the gravel and the clay liner was not code. So I'd be interested in having a conversation with you after this if you're able to verify that it was code, because if it was, then that was a fundamental flaw. But that's not the advice I've received today.
I do know why it's code, because of the fact that I've been laying drain for a long time as a councillor.
So can we have a chat afterwards then, please? Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick one. You talk about rates. How do those of us who are on metered water, the likes of, because now, for example, I don't use the minimum, but then you're charged the minimum. And the likes of they've gone up quite significantly over the last few years.
For metered water, those who are on metered water, we call extraordinary metered water, there are two charges for the metered water. One we call the minimum charge or the fixed charge, and then you have the consumption charge that's above 80 cubic meters. So what we tend to do is that when we look at setting the rates. The minimum charge would be the same as the targeted rate for all urban users. So currently the targeted rate for water is 700, so the minimum charge would be 700, right up to 80 cubic meters. Anything more than that, the consumption charge, the council will look at the underlying costs of the providing the water, and then it will recalculate what we call the consumption charges on an annual basis. So this is to make sure that people who are in, I would say, in the urban area connected to the water scheme who are paying a fixed charge, this year $700, we make sure that those who are in the extraordinary connections that are consuming more than the minimum charge or consumption rate are paying a fair share of that as well. So that's how we determine that.
So therefore, if you're on metered water, you're not charged the 100, the price of the target rate.
Yes, you are,
So
because
you're paying twice.
uh,
If you're paying the 100, the $700 as part of your target rate, and then you're paying as far as the minimum charge, therefore you're being charged twice. You're being charged $700 as the part of the target rate, and you're being charged for the water.
yeah, it's so. I'll repeat again to make it quite clear. So those are extraordinary users. You've got two charge. One is the minimum charge up to 80 cubic meters, which is the same as what the urban ratepayers are paying. So currently, the urban ratepayers are paying $700 annually. Those are extraordinary users who use less than 80 cubic meters minimum charge, you pay the $700. If we were to do this project and the increase is $100, urban ratepayers will pay the 700 plus 100. Extraordinary users with meter charges for the minimum charge will still pay the same 7 to 100. The consumption charge becomes different because you're consuming more than the minimum charge. Then you pay a consumption rate.
I'm down Campbell Road last Friday, so therefore I'm not being charged the targeted rate. That's what, because I'm not a user. Well, that's what I'm asking. The question was that I'm down Cabin Road, so I'm not urban, but I'm on metered water. So therefore, in my rates, I haven't looked at it, am I charged the targeted water rate, and then am I charged separately?
No, you're not. Just one charge.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, just one charge. Yeah.
Have we got any more impounded water supply questions? One down here, and then I'll flick over to Sharon, who's got a couple of pre-submitted questions that we'll just run through quickly. If we're finished.
Yes, is there any record of a pointometer test of the dam site prior to the construction of the dam? Now that's to test the foundations.
Do you know that one? Pointometer.
We've gone back and located all the documentation that we could in relation to the construction of the original dam. I can recall seeing documentation in relation to the eastern embankment and the testing that was done to the fill that was put into that eastern embankment. I can't comment on any other documentation in relation to what any geological investigations that were done. So everything that all the records that we've been able to find, we have provided to Tonkin and Taylor so that they have that initial information to support the investigations that they've been doing.
So that record still exists?
I haven't personally seen that record. I'm not sure. I would have to go and have a look. I can't answer that question on the spot here. I'd have to go and investigate and see what information we have been able to provide to Tonkin and Taylor. So if I could get your details, then I can get back to you after this. So I'll catch up with you after this.
Thanks, Roger. Terry, can I just get you to pass the microphone to Councillor Sharon, and she'll run through we've had a couple of pre-submitted, and there's one there just around pollen again. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. I don't want to get any feedback. Prior to tonight's meeting, we did have a number of questions come in, and we're always very grateful that people express concerns or queries regarding these very important issues in our community. Although the focus on tonight was around the impounded supply, we did receive a number of questions regarding another very topical discussion that's going on in the community around the directive that councils received to fluoridate the water supply. So we received a couple of questions. I've summarised them a little bit on the board here because there were some themes that were concurrent throughout those questions. So we've had expressions of questions around will Tara District Council consult with the community and ensure that their voice is heard if they do not wish fluoride to be added to the water supply. There's been a recent court case and we've been asked the question, will council consider an injunction to the directive that we've received? And also we've had some questions fielded around if the water supply is fluoridated, how do we as council intend to monitor the impact on our community, gather data and measure any impact that it would have on the overall health of our community. So those weren't particularly focused around the impound supply, but we also at council wanted to acknowledge that we have been receiving these questions that wish to be expressed tonight. I don't know whether we want to address these. It is certainly a very topical discussion at our council meetings, and we're always very keen to hear from our community around their diverse views about something this important. It's an operational matter. We've received the directive, and we await, I guess, the rollout of what the outcome from some of those discussions are. So that's the fluoride related ones. The other one I think we've probably covered off now again though, Tracy, was the question from John regarding the impact of the pollen in the pine trees, and I think you addressed that, Roger, with the liner and the filtering that goes on. So just to reiterate, very grateful for any questions and concerns expressed. I know the comms team at the council always ensure that we as elected members are informed of what questions and concerns are happening out there in the community. How's that?
I will, thank you, Councillor Sharon. I will just address the judgment decision that Councillor Sharon referenced in terms of the recent court hearing. So just so everyone knows, as soon as we received that judgment and notification of it, I did write to the Ministry of Health around getting some clarification on what it actually meant in terms of the direction that we had been provided. And basically, I'm going to read out our formal reply that we have been sharing widely with those individuals that have been requesting information from us. Just to put some context around it, around fluoridation at the moment, all of our designs and information is currently sitting with the Ministry of Health. So we are in a holding period anyway, so it'll be unlikely that this will be progressing over the next couple of months because of where we're at the moment. But there's been no formal council decision to halt what we're doing, but we are in a holding pattern at the moment anyway. So we closely reviewed the judgment of Radich J, dated 10th of November 2023 when it was issued. This judgment was made in respect of the hearing held 18 September 2023 in the matter of an application for judicial review of directions made by the Director General of Health under Section 116E (1) of the Health Act 1956. We draw your attention to paragraph 114 of the judgment, where the judge made the point that there were factors that needed to be considered before an order could be made, either setting aside the Director General of Health's decision or sending it back for consideration. Radich J left it to the parties, for the plaintiff and the defendant, to consider whether they could agree to an outcome and file a joint memorandum on their preferred approach with issues of relief. He noted the options for relief included either overturning the directive or sending it back for consideration. If an agreement on relief could not be reached, then a further hearing would be convened by the judge for that purpose. What this means is that the judge has not overturned the Director General of Health's decision, and until such a time as that may happen, the Council has no alternative but to continue to follow the directive that was issued under Section 116E of the Health Act 1956. We note that ratepayer funding is not being used for the installation of fluoridation plant for the Dannevirke water supply, as this has been fully funded by the Ministry of Health. Thank you.
So effectively that sits with the Ministry of Health at the moment. There isn't any progress being made with TDC. We'll just wait for that to go through. On the topic of consultation, look, I guess my suggestion is that you contact your Member of Parliament, because even if we talk to the community, I can't give effect to any of that. This is a directive that's come from the Ministry of Health. So the best action that you can take is with those Members of Parliament to have their influence, but that's where the decision sits. It is considered a Ministry of Health issue. So I hope that helps, Sharon. That covers the monitoring of community wellbeing. From that, that's not a conversation that we've had, and I guess at the moment we're in that holding pattern, but it's something that we can take note of, but also discuss with the ministry. They might come out with something on that, but it's not one that has happened yet, so we'll certainly take note of that. Okay, that covers. We've got one last question, and then I will close.
Just talking about the fluoridation issue. I hear what you're saying, that we're in a holding position at the moment, and that's great news for us that are against fluoride going into the water. That's really good. However, to say there's absolutely nothing that can be done, yes, I think we need to wait a little longer to see what the court, the results of the court and the hearing and how that goes. But there is still an option, depending on how that court hearing goes, to actually have put out an injunction. So as we understand it, that is still an option that our council can take if the court hearing doesn't result in an overturning of the directive.
Yeah, it could, and that's a conversation we could have, but actually the cost of doing so would be significant to take on the Crown or the Ministry in that. That's the note that I would make with them. Yeah.
Yes, but I think then again we have to come back round to consultation with the people of this community and the ratepayers, because there are many ratepayers here who would want that action to be taken. So it is a discussion that would need to be happening.
And those costs would need to be declared.
Correct. Yeah. And those costs would need to be discussed as part of that discussion. Correct.
Yeah. Okay, right, we're nearly on time, and we have committed, and we will have further of these meetings, just to make sure that we are keeping everybody informed and involved. But I really want to acknowledge and thank Brian, Raj and Hamish and Roger, and our entire Waters team. We talk about, drought and will we have enough water and things to get through, but that's their job. They manage water every single day. Their skills are in really short supply nationwide, and I'm really grateful that they are committed and work here in the Taurua district. They do their very best managing demand and supply, not just for Dannevirke, but actually for 7 towns, and their roles have become quite public facing. But thank you all for your passion and commitment and time in coming along this evening, and I hope that you have got a bit more clarity and confidence in both what we're facing and what we're planning. We have a window of opportunity to implement what's going to be a long-lasting and resilient supply of water to Dannevirke. We want to be able to make the best decisions by continuing to use experts and to be really well informed, and this will take a little bit longer, but we will get a far better result, and we have to. The decisions to add the water treatment plant, raw water storage and additional treated water storage will give some resilience this summer, and when the impounded supply is taken out of action. We'll keep you well informed on those water restrictions and our plans, and as we head into summer we do have as much water as we can hold, so please, Roger said, if you can fill those pools, tanks, and carry out any water blasting and things like that before any restrictions are implemented, and I know that we've had so much rain at the moment that you just don't actually get the chance to do that. All the information, as I said, will be shared tonight, including the recording onto the website. We are committed to transparency, we're committed to communicating, and these are the only way that we're going to build your trust with us in the community. So we're also going to be holding a Facebook Live session tomorrow. That's just for anybody that wants to ask further questions if you've got something more, or for those that don't have the ability to get out to a meeting. So if you feel free to join us again online tomorrow evening at 6:30. So I do thank you once again very much, and I'll close us with a karakia. Ko tauru rangamairi e, ki runga o ngā iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world. Take care and stay well, and I will hang around for a bit longer if people do have further questions or want to approach us about anything at all. So have a great evening. Thank you very, very much. Pō Mārie.